The Bedrock City Project by UsuriosBerry39. Chapter 1. When people talk about Bedrock City now, they usually think about the later stages, the expansions, the side projects, the surprises, and the things that happened way out at the end. But the first Bedrock City wasn't any of that. It didn't start with some grand vision or a community goal. It started as a test, nothing more. The idea was simple. Could a bedrock-themed city even exist in the first place? Not a monument, not a single structure. A city-style base that followed a consistent design, naming, and identity. At the time, nobody had done something like that under the Bedrock City concept. There was no roadmap, no series, no thought of BC2 or BC3. There was only one objective: prove the concept works once. I built the first Bedrock City with practicality in mind. It wasn't made to impress anyone. It just needed to function well enough to prove that a bedrock-themed base could exist meaningfully, that it could be built, maintained, and recognized as a city rather than a temporary hideout. A couple of players, like Zombie Clinic and Anonymous Crafter, stopped by early on to check in on what I was working on, but this stage was mostly a solo push, driven by necessity. The focus early on wasn't exploits, and illegal bedrock wasn't even in the conversation yet. That would come much, much later. Back then our tools were crafters, injections, and basic structure planning, sometimes shared or compared with Anonymous Crafter when bouncing microscopic layout ideas around. Those were the elements being tested. The Bedrock City identity was forming, but this was still the prototype stage. I wasn't chasing scale, fame, or a massive group of players. If a handful of us could make it work, that would be enough. And it did work. Bedrock City 1 proved exactly what it needed to. A bedrock-themed city wasn't just an idea. It could be a reality. It stood long enough, functioned well enough, and left enough of a mark that the next logical question wasn't, should we build another? It was, how much bigger is the next one going to be? There wasn't drama or disaster that ended BC1. It served its purpose, and once the concept was validated, it was time to move forward. The project didn't end because it failed. It ended because it succeeded. If Bedrock City 1 was the experiment, then Bedrock City 2 would become the phase where the idea actually grew. Chapter 2. Bedrock City 1 proved the idea could work. Once that was done, there was no point repeating the same experiment. The next step was obvious. Expand everything. Bedrock City 2 wasn't just BC1, but larger. It was the first time the project scaled in every meaningful way. The base got bigger. More people got involved. The systems and structure of the city became more developed and intentional. A shift noted even in early accounts by players like Berserk, who saw the layout become clearer at a glance. If BC1 was about testing whether the Bedrock City concept was viable, BC2 was about showing what it could become. With BC2, I wasn't just building for a few early contributors anymore. Word had spread enough that people were interested, curious, and willing to take part. For the first time, the Bedrock City project wasn't just my idea. It was something others wanted to contribute to. Visitors such as Lemon Robin 78030 and Arctic Shark MC passed through during planning sessions, leaving small but timely inputs that helped firm up the direction. Later, the expansion meant more planning, more coordination, and more room for others to leave their mark. BC2 brought a clearer layout, improved organization, and a stronger identity. There was more infrastructure, more functionality, and more intention behind how the city was built and how it operated. It wasn't chaotic or random growth. It was structured progress. Looking back, BC2 is where the Bedrock City name actually became a project, rather than a one-off concept. It stopped being a test and started being a series. The mindset shifted from "can this exist" to "how far can we push this?" BC2's success set the stage for everything that came after it, especially the shift that would define the next era. Because as the project grew, so did the people around it, and eventually the community dynamic became just as important as the builds themselves. That's what led into the next phase. A stage where Bedrock City wasn't just a build or a project anymore. It started becoming a community. That evolution is what shaped Bedrock City 3. Chapter 3. By the time Bedrock City 2 had run its course, the project had already proven it could grow. We had scale, more people, and better structure, but BC2 was still driven mainly by the development of the city itself. Bedrock City 3 shifted the focus in a different direction. BC3 wasn't about building the biggest version yet. It wasn't about pushing the concept further or trying to top the last one. This stage became about the people involved. For the first time, the activity in a Bedrock City wasn't measured by how much we expanded the base, but by how much we interacted within it. Players were talking more, hanging out, being active together, and contributing in ways that weren't purely about construction. Regular visitors and familiar faces, such as Satan Dragon 4233, added to the daily life of the city simply by being present, sharing ideas, and taking part in the atmosphere that was forming there. There was building, yes, but it wasn't the main point anymore. The city was a place people wanted to be, not just a project they came to work on. We were spending time together, working on things side by side, and being part of something that felt shared. It wasn't a structured community with rules or expectations. It was casual, organic, and driven by the people who chose to be there. If BC1 was the experiment, and BC2 was the expansion, then BC3 was the human stage of the project. The Bedrock City name started to mean more than just the physical bases. It became a group identity, something people felt connected to, not just something they built at. Looking back, this phase mattered more than people realized at the time. BC3 is where the Bedrock City project shifted from a build to a group with momentum. The community energy from BC3 would end up shaping what happened later, even beyond the main cities. But BC3 also marked a turning point, because once you introduce a social element, the project isn't just about construction anymore. It becomes affected by the people, their interests, and where they drift next. And what came next wasn't planned. It wasn't even part of the main project. It happened by accident, and it would end up becoming one of the most unexpected chapters tied to the Bedrock City name. It started with donkeys, at the end, near the world border. Chapter 4, me and Baz weren't hunting for exploits. We were scouting for a location to stage an epic build that still hasn't been realized. We were just covering ground, comparing terrain, and arguing about sightlines when Baz called me over. He'd found something that shouldn't have been there, a glitched portal. Illegal bedrock embedded where it didn't belong. And, of all things, donkeys. We both knew instantly what that combination meant. It wasn't just odd terrain generation or a funny spawn. It was a convergence point, proof that the server's edge cases had bled into reality out near the end world border. In that moment, neither of us cared about the original build anymore. We shifted on the spot. The decision wasn't complicated. This find was too rare to ignore, and it deserved a Bedrock City response. We didn't declare a new main city. This wasn't BC4. It became a Bedrock City base because we were Bedrock City, and because the site demanded Bedrock City discipline. Document, stabilize, build what matters, don't overextend, and leave the ego at the spawn. We treated it like an expansion in spirit. not in numbering. The rules changed out there. You don't flex at the world border, you adapt. The donkeys were the strangest part, not because they existed, but because they existed there. We stabilized the area and learned quickly what not to touch. Illegal bedrock wasn't a design language for us in BC 1 to BC 3, and it wasn't supposed to be here either. But the location had already made the choice. The illegal bedrock was part of the site's DNA. We didn't bring it in, we built around it, acknowledging it as a historical artifact of the glitch, rather than a resource to harvest. What made the base unique wasn't just the artifacts, it was the attitude adjustment. BC 1 taught us proof, BC 2 taught us scale, BC 3 taught us people, the Space Donkey base taught us restraint. When you work at the limits of the world, you stop assuming the world will hold you up. We moved slow, framed the portal, cataloged the anomalies, and made minimal intentional additions, so the place could be read like a ledger. This is what we found. This is what we did. This is what we chose not to do. Baz deserves full credit for the initial stumble. We both recognized the significance at the same time. And from that recognition forward, we acted as Bedrock City does, deliberately. The accidental expansion label stuck because none of it was planned, but the process wasn't chaotic. It was measured. We didn't chase clout. We captured an event. People will argue about whether this base counts the same way the numbered cities do. I don't. It's a Bedrock City base because it sits inside our lineage and changed our trajectory. After this, the idea of BC 4 couldn't just be bigger BC 3. The bar moved. BC 4 would have to respect the edge, treat the world's behavior as a co-author, not just a canvas. So when we finally turned back from the border, we left with more than screenshots and coordinates. We left with a design problem worthy of a mainline city. Build like you've seen the limits, and don't pretend they aren't there. That's the mindset that shaped BC 4. Chapter 5. By the time Bedrock City 3 had run its course, it was clear the project had changed. The concept had been proven, the expansion had been executed, and the community phase had shown what Bedrock City looked like when people were at the center of it. The Space Donkey base added something different too, an understanding of limits, and a reminder that not every discovery needed to be scaled into a mainline city. With all of that behind us, Bedrock City 4 wasn't about repeating anything we had already done. It was about building with intention from the start. BC 4 is the most organized and deliberately structured version of Bedrock City so far, shaped by everything the earlier cities taught us. I approached BC 4 differently than the others. Instead of starting with a concept to prove or a group to accommodate, the focus was on clarity. The layout, the systems, the expectations, and the purpose of the city were defined before blocks went down. The goal wasn't size or population. It was coherence. Every part of BC 4 exists for a reason and fits within the direction of the city as a whole. Several who had seen the project's earlier stages, such as ProGamer360365, Maximum Chris, and 3 Exclusive Dragon, recognized the shift in pace and intent when they later visited, noting how the city's foundation seemed guided rather than improvised. Reflecting on the earlier cities makes this shift easy to see. BC 1 established the idea. BC 2 scaled it. BC 3 brought people into it. The Space Donkey base taught restraint and respect for the environment we were building in. BC 4 is where those lessons are applied. It's not reactionary. It's not experimental. It's intentional. BC 4 is active. It isn't a relic or a completed project. It's still being shaped, and because of that, it reflects a more disciplined approach. There's no need to force growth or chase milestones. The project knows what it is now, and the build reflects that. Progress happens steadily, and with purpose. Looking ahead, I don't feel the need to predict what comes after BC4. If there's a BC5 one day, it will come from a clear reason, not momentum, not habit. Bedrock City 4 stands on the foundation of what came before it. But it isn't defined by the past. It's defined by the standard we set for it from the start. Build it right, build it intentionally, and let the work speak for itself. That's where Bedrock City is now. Not at the beginning of the story, not at the height of expansion, but in a stage where direction matters more than scale. And that's the right place for it to be. Epilogue. The Bedrock City project has moved through phases that each served a clear purpose. None of them were perfect, and none of them were meant to be repeated. Each one existed for the time it needed to, and then it made room for the next. Today, Bedrock City 4 is the active chapter. It isn't driven by urgency, numbers, or external pressure. It continues because it has direction, and because there's still value in building it. The project isn't trying to recapture the past or outdo what came before. It's applying what was learned, quietly, steadily, and with intent. The Bedrock City name has carried through concepts, expansions, community shifts, unexpected discoveries, and environmental extremes. It's no longer a question of whether a Bedrock City can exist. It's a matter of how well it can be shaped when experience guides the build rather than trial, scale, or momentum. The people who moved through the cities left impressions of their presence, not always through grand actions, but through shared time, curiosity, and the way they helped shape what each era became. Their moments within the story will linger in memory, whether or not they are spoken aloud. There's no definitive end to the Bedrock City story. If the project stopped tomorrow, the lineage would still stand on its own. If it continues, it will do so because there's a clear reason to move forward. The work has reached a point where it doesn't need to prove anything. It can simply be what it is. For now, Bedrock City VIE is enough. The next chapter, if there ever is one, will arrive the same way every major shift in this project has. Not because it's expected, but because it's